Okay, we are beginning with Srila Prabhupada's introduction. Uh, Prabhupada begins the introduction by expounding on 1.1.1 text 1 of the first chapter of the first canto of the Bhagavatam, and he points out that this is the subject matter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The conception of God and the conception of absolute truth are not on the same level. The Srimad Bhagavatam hits on the target of the absolute truth. The conception of God indicates the controller, whereas the conception of the absolute truth indicates the summum bonum, or the ultimate source of all energies. When we talk about controller, we are just talking of someone who exercises control over others. But the summum bonum, or the ultimate source of all energies, is not merely just uh, a controller. He is much more than that. He is the source of the creation, maintenance, and destruction. He is the one who helps conditioned souls become liberated. He is the one who maintains everything from within as the indwelling super soul. He is the one who causes Vedic knowledge to be spread within the universe so that people can have objective, verifiable information about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and its transcendental domain. He is independent, he is conscious, he is distinct from the individual living entities. Now, all of these conceptions can only fit in with the conception of the absolute truth, because one could be a controller and not be all of these things. There is no difference of opinion about the personal feature of God as the controller, because a controller cannot be impersonal. Controller means a person. Of course, modern government, especially democratic government, is impersonal to some extent, but ultimately the chief executive head is a person, and the impersonal feature of government is subordinate to the personal feature. So, without a doubt, whenever we refer to control over others, we must admit the existence of a personal feature. A controller necessarily has to be a person. You cannot have an impersonal Brahman as the controller. Ishvara, by definition, has to be a person. Because there are different controllers for different managerial positions, there may be many small gods. This universe needs to be managed, and there are various uh, padavis, positions of adhikar, of office, where different aspects of phenomenal creation are being controlled. So there are several subordinate gods. The Vedic literature expounds upon that in great detail in the Puranas and many other literature. According to the Bhagavad Gita, any controller who has some specific extraordinary power is called a Vibhuti Mat Sattva, or controller empowered by the Lord. This is stated in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Yadyad Vibhuti Mat Sattvam Srimad Urjitameva Va Tattadevavagachatvam Mama Tejomsha Sambhava. Krishna is saying that you should know that whatever opulences that you see, that is emanating from me. Here is the actual text. This is 10.41 of Bhagavad Gita. Know that all opulent, beautiful, and glorious creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. So, this is how Krishna points out that all these controllers are empowered by the Lord, by Him. There are many Vibhutimat Sattvas, controllers, or gods with various specific powers, but the absolute truth is one without a second. It means that the absolute truth is unrivaled, swatantra, independent. He does not depend on anyone else for his existence. He does not depend on anyone else for his cognizance. He does not depend on anyone else for his functioning. This Srimad Bhagavatam designates the absolute truth or the Samam Bonam as the Param Satyam, the supreme truth. The author of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Vyasadeva, first offers his respectful obeisances unto the Param Satyam, absolute truth. And because the Param Satyam is the ultimate source of all energies, the Param Satyam is the supreme person. He is a person because he is the source of all energies. The gods or the controllers are undoubtedly persons, but the Param Satyam from whom the gods derive powers of control is the supreme person. Monotheism is glaringly evident in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the summary and the purport of the entire Vedic literature. So we understand that ultimately there is one supreme person as per the Vedic version. The Sanskrit word Ishvara, controller, conveys the import of God, but the supreme person is called the Parameshvara or the supreme Ishvara. The supreme person or Parameshvara is the supreme conscious personality, and because he does not derive any power from any other source, he is supremely independent. Janmadyasya yatonvayad itarataschaartheshu abhigyaswarat. He shines by himself. He is supremely independent. It does not depend on anyone else for his power. Abhigya. He is the supreme conscious being. In the Vedic literatures, Brahma is described as the supreme god or the head of all other gods like Indra, Chandra and Varuna. But the Srimad Bhagavatam confirms that even Brahma is not independent as far as his power and knowledge are concerned. Even Brahma had to learn Vedic knowledge from the supreme being, who is the subject matter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. He received knowledge in the form of the Vedas from the supreme person who resides within the heart of every living being. That supreme personality knows everything directly and indirectly. So that supreme personality of Godhead, that supreme independent person, he is conscious of everything, both directly and indirectly. Individual infinitesimal persons who are parts and parcels of the supreme personality may know directly and indirectly everything about their bodies or external features, but the supreme personality knows everything about both his external and internal features. We are individual infinitesimal living entities. We are not Vibhu. We are not infinite constitutionally. We learned this from the Vedic literatures. We are parts and parcels of the supreme person. Mamaivamsho jivaloke jivabhuta sanatana. And directly, through direct experience, we can understand about our bodies, gross bodies. And indirectly also, we can understand about our bodies through inference. But the supreme person, he knows everything about his external and internal features. External features refer to the external potency and the manifestation of the external potency. Internal features refers to the manifestation of his internal potency. The manifestation of the external potency is this material cosmic manifestation. The manifestation of the internal potency is the spiritual manifestation in spiritual variety. The words Janmadyasya suggest that the source of all production, maintenance or destruction is the same supreme conscious person. Notice that the source is the same. It is not that the source of all production, maintenance or destruction is different from that supreme conscious person. It's the same person. And that same supreme conscious person is designated as the supreme truth, Satyam Param. Followers of Shankaracharya claim that the supreme absolute truth is different ultimately from the source of all production, maintenance or destruction of the manifested universes. But that is not the version presented by Vyasadeva in the Vedanta Sutra or in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Even in our present experience, we can know that nothing is generated from inert matter. but inert matter can be generated from the living entity. Inert matter does not consciously produce things. For instance, by contact with the living entity, the material body develops into a working machine. Men with a poor fund of knowledge mistake the bodily machinery to be the living being. But the fact is that the living being is the basis of the bodily machine. So, this is an elementary lesson which is taught right at the beginning in the Upanishads and in Gita Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita. This is the first lesson, that we are living beings and we are living inside bodies. Dehi nityam avadhyoyam dehe sarvasya bharata. The bodily machine is useless as soon as the living spark is away from it. Similarly, the original source of all material energy is the Supreme Person. So just as the living entity is the basis for the bodily machine, the Supreme Lord is the basis of this universal machine. The universe can be compared to a machine, just as the body can be compared to a machine. This fact is expressed in all the Vedic literatures, and all the exponents of spiritual science have accepted this truth. So, this has been accepted by all the authentic teachers of Vedanta Darshan, Vedanta philosophy, and this is expressed in all the Vedic literatures. The living force is called Brahman, and one of the greatest acharyas, teachers, namely Sripad Shankaracharya, has preached that Brahman is substance, whereas the cosmic world is category. The original source of all energies is the living force and is logically accepted as the Supreme Person. Shankaracharya has preached that Brahman is substance and this cosmic world is a superimposition on him. The original source of all energies is a living being, and even Shankaracharya accepts that, and he is logically accepted as the Supreme Person. The Srimad Bhagavatam, however, in contrast with Shankaracharya's teachings, the Srimad Bhagavatam, it asserts that the Supreme Absolute Truth is himself the Supreme Person. Shankaracharya has concocted a two-tier conception of spiritual reality, and has said that Brahman, the impersonal unitary plane of consciousness, that is substance, and you have an Ishvara who is not ultimately real, but worship of whom is required for anartha nivritti, basically. Whereas the Srimad Bhagavatam equates the Supreme Ishvara with the Supreme Brahman and says, this is Bhagavan. He is therefore conscious of everything, past, present, and future, and also of each and every corner of his manifestations, both material and spiritual. So that Supreme Being, that Supreme Brahman, that Supreme Paramatma, that Supreme Bhagavan, he is the source of all energies, and therefore he is fully conscious of the past, present, and future. Krishna has already stated this in the Bhagavad Gita. Vedaham samatitani vartamanani cha Arjuna. He says, I know everything past, present, and future. He is also aware of each and every part of his manifestation, the material world and the spiritual world. An imperfect living being does not even know what is happening within his own personal body. He eats his food but does not know how this food is transformed into energy or how it sustains his body. When a living being is perfect, he is aware of everything that happens, and since the Supreme Person is all perfect, it is quite natural that he knows everything in all detail. The Vedic literature, the Upanishads, state that when a living being is perfect, is aware of everything that happens. Of course, to the extent the Supreme Lord allows him to know.